Hey guys, welcome back to the J-Man Commentating Podcast. This is episode 2 of my baseball career. If you haven't seen episode 1, I highly suggest you go and check that one out because this is not only the final episode, but this is also a straight continuation of episode 1. So you don't want to miss out on that. And there will definitely be a spoiler from the end of episode 1 here in episode 2. But before I get into all of that, I want to mention the sponsor for this episode, and that is Underdogs Athletics. There are a lot of important things in my life. There's family, there's sports, and then the number one most important thing is my faith. I would not be where I am without my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and it is very important to me that I show that off in as many ways as I can. And Underdogs Athletics not only has attire that shows off my faith, but it also is very comfortable for athletic attire and just everyday attire. Again, like I mentioned, I'm currently wearing their cutoff black hoodie that says Powered by Jesus on it. I have another hoodie that I wear more in the fall times and winter times when it gets a little colder outside. Also says Powered by Jesus. It's a full long sleeve hoodie, but their clothes are very comfortable and they're very thick and good fabric, and I highly suggest you guys go and check them out. They are at underdogsathletics.com. Use code JMAN777 to get 15% off of your purchase. Again, that's code JMAN777 to get 15% off your purchase at underdogsathletics.com. So go check them out. Back to the story. From where I left you guys off, I had just finished off my freshman year of high school. It was COVID year, and we didn't really get much of a high school season. I mostly just had some travel ball here and there. But now going into my sophomore year, we knew we were going to have a baseball season, and I was left with a tough decision on if I was going to go up to varsity and end up playing on varsity for 3 years, or if I was going to stay down on JV for a year and then play varsity for 2 years after that. Going into this, there were a bunch of things that were kind of being thrown in, and I'll just kind of break down what went into this decision. So some of the parts that made this decision very difficult was the coaching. I knew both of the coaches very well. I really liked both of the coaches a lot. The varsity coach, he was one of my travel ball coaches for the past 6-7 years. He was the parent of one of the players, which is why he was one of the coaches, but he was also a very good coach, and I was very happy to have him as a coach. And, I was excited to have him as a coach on varsity. So, it would be very difficult for me to say no to a guy who's been my coach for the last 6 years. And on the other side for JV, he wasn't specifically one of my coaches, but he had been a coach that I had been around with for a very long time. He coached my younger brother. He's 3 years younger than me, so he had coached a lot of his teams. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but he had coached a lot of his teams, so I had been around those. He did a lot of stuff for Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I had been a lot around that as well. So I really knew him more as a person than a coach, but I also knew him as a coach, and I really liked what he did as a coach. So those part itself didn't really make this decision any easier. Another part that didn't really make this decision very easy was my teammates. A lot of my teammates were up on varsity, and they were I had a lot of chemistry with those guys. I had spent the last 6 or 7 years with them, and I, loved every single second of it. They're great guys, and, they're really good baseball players. So it would be awesome to be teammates with them in high school, all the way until we graduate. It would be really awesome. But on the other side was playing time. I was not going to get playing time if I played on varsity. I was at a point where I was, as far as hitting goes, I was a little bit too good for JV, but I wasn't good enough for varsity. That was kind of an odd dynamic that I was kind of in at the moment, and I understood that. The pitching on varsity was very good. In fact, it was so good that somebody who was pitching on varsity at the time recently had just gotten drafted by the Yankees. If you want to look him up, Owen Parliament is his name, and yeah, he just got drafted by the New York Yankees as a pitcher. He pitched against our high school on varsity. So that was the type of, competition that we were going up against on varsity. And then down on JV was less than that. Like it was a very lower end of the competition. So I knew that if I wanted to play, I would have to choose JV. If I wanted the bragging rights, I would choose varsity. And not to say that I wouldn't touch the field on varsity. The varsity coach had, kind of this idea where I'd be a pinch runner. We had some guys on our team who weren't necessarily fast, So I would basically pinch run for them later on in the game, but that would be all that I would do. I would get in the game, I would run, I would get a maximum of 3 bases, and then I'd get pulled from the game, and that was the end. Like that was my decision, was if I was going to play, just 3 bases and that was it, or if I was going to play the whole game down on JV. And really that was kind of where the decision was made, was the idea of getting playing time and being on the field a ton, or sitting the bench and maybe getting in every once in a while. So the decision was that I was going to play on JV. I love the coaching. I love the team. I like to see the guys who are younger. I wanted to have that opportunity of being a leader on the team, which I thought was kind of a cool aspect for me. But I also knew that these guys were, it was going to be different teammates. So I was going to have to learn how they play and learn who they are as people and as teammates. And I thought that was a really cool dynamic for me, which I was very excited about. But it wasn't going to be like I wasn't going to play on varsity at all. So if varsity had like a huge game, they would actually tend to bring me up on varsity for that game, and they would have me pinch run in that game, and I would basically just I would pinch run, I would get pulled, that would be it. And it would only happen for like one game. So it happened a few times, most notably on opening day. They had me pinch run. We ended up losing that game by 1. It was not because I made a base running mistake. It was for other reasons. Somebody else made a base running mistake. But we lost that game, but it was a very good game. And, I got to run a little bit. I got to see what varsity was like. I got to see how the players carried themselves before, during, and after the game. And it was really cool because then I got to bring that kind of idea over to JV and kind of show them this is how these guys carry themselves. This is how they do this. This is how they do that. And it was a really cool, moment. It was a really cool aspect that I got to bring to the team and really show them how it goes. And then when they would go on to varsity, it would be an easier transition for them because they know how to carry themselves because of something that I told them years ago. So I had an absolute blast. I loved playing on JV with these guys. They did such a good job. I got to see what it was like being a leader. I played shortstop for most of the year. I don't even remember the batting errors that I had, but it was very good. But again, the competition that I was playing on was a bit low for me, whereas if I went to varsity, it would be a bit high for me. So I was kind of playing on a lower league, kind of getting a bit more confidence, really was kind of the idea of this season before going into my junior year where I would have to play on varsity. So that was kind of how that season went. And then after the JV season ended, was just around the time of sectionals for varsity. So I was basically just brought up to varsity to play in sectionals. And again, it was the same thing. I would mostly just pinch run. We had one game in sectionals. It was the quarterfinals. It was kind of a big deal. Our school would tend to get the number 1 seed in sectionals and then would kind of fail in the second round. So it was a very big deal that we would be in this game. And we were very much in this game. We battled with this team. It was back and forth the whole game. We got into the bottom of the last inning and we were down by 1. And one of our slower runners got on base to lead off the inning. And sure enough, coach looked and had me go pinch run, which as a sophomore was a bit terrifying that one of your first times on varsity is pinch running in sectionals. But I was over on first. I was like, I just gotta do my job. And sure enough, one of the first pitches, he has me steal, which is wild if you think about it. Having somebody steal in the bottom of the 7th inning, and he's a sophomore and has barely really been on the team, but by golly, did I take off, and I was thrown out by a mile, but the shortstop failed to pick the ball, and it actually kicked away from him a little bit, so I was safe at second. So I had a stolen base in sectionals. It was my first varsity stolen base. I had a bunch of stolen bases on JV, but like I mentioned, it was just, the competition wasn't really my level at the time. So I slid into second. I was pumped. I'm now the tying run. I'm now in scoring position. The batter hits a fly ball to right field. I tag up, go to third. Big deal. Now we have the tying run over on third. I believe the next guy got out. I was still on third. And then we had 2 outs, bottom of the last inning. We had one of our our more contact hitters up, and I'm just kind of sitting there for third, just kind of like, just get a single, like anything, and we win this game, or at least we tie this game. And sure enough, he hits an absolute line drive to right field. I'm taking off for home. I'm kind of like almost basking in the glory of like, oh my gosh, we did it. And the right fielder comes running in and slides, and his hat goes flying behind him, and he just kind of stands up, not really much of an emotion on him, turns around, bends down, and just kind of starts picking some stuff up, and the ump says he catches the ball. And most of the people on our team, including myself, was almost positive that the ball slid out of his glove and that I just tied the game. But the umpire stood by his call, and that was how the season ended, was right there. And, I mean, if you ask anybody on our team, including myself to this day, we all will still tell you that he dropped the ball. It was, there's no way that, you just catch a ball to send your team to the semifinals of sectionals, and you're disappointed. Like, that was just kind of the face that he had on. So it was a very odd situation for us. But for me, the killer really came when, I'm just kind of watching as everyone's screaming and yelling and celebrating and crying, and I just turn and look, and right in front of me, 2 feet away, is home plate, and I'm like, that's how close we were to tying this game. It was just 2 feet. It's a very tough pill to swallow, and I was like, that's gonna be the motivation that I bring, is 2 feet. We were 2 feet away from making this happen, and that's where we landed. So yeah, it was a tough day. It was a tough week for just about everyone. I mean, the only thing is just you're replaying that play over and over and over again. It's just running through your head, the same play. But, that was just how it ended. So it was heading into that summer, our team really was like ready to bring it. And, but next was our travel ball season. So we got to have some fun in the meantime. But, when you lose a game like that, the first thing you want to do is beat the crap out of a team. So I felt bad, but the first team that we faced off in travel ball got absolutely destroyed. Like, we beat the crap out of them. We had no remorse. We just ran through them, and we didn't stop running. It was kind of one of the cooler things to be a part of. You just have this really down moment, and then you're just like, get so upset, and you just ram right through the next team. It's a really cool thing to really think about and be a part of. It sucks, obviously, you kind of wanted to win that game, but, now you got to beat the crap out of the next team you played against. But that was not the only thing that happened that summer. In fact, that part kind of gets overshadowed as later on we were put into a tournament in Cooperstown. Yes, this was our second tournament in Cooperstown, but this one was a little bit different. It was a wood bat tournament, and you would actually play at different high schools in Cooperstown. And in one of the games that we played in, we played on Doubleday Field. If you don't know much about Doubleday Field, look it up. It is one of the most historic fields in baseball. There is no movie made after it, although I think there should, but it used to be where there were like all-star games and like old-timey all-star games. Guys like Babe Ruth had played on this field. I'm trying to think of some other names that have been on the field, like absolute legends. Mickey Mantle played on this field. It was really cool to be a part of. Ken Griffey Jr. just played on that field a few years ago, and it was really special for him to play on that field. So, you can imagine what we felt like when we played on that field. And I'll never forget, we went into the last inning. We were up by 2, I think. It was kind of a cool game. The only thing I really done at the plate in this game was walk. I think I walked like twice, and that was it. Or I struck out once. Like, I ran the bases a bunch, but I didn't like hit it at all, so I don't really get to say like, oh, I hit it out in Doubleday. But I played right for most of the game, and coming in towards the end of the game, they actually had moved me over to third base, which I'd played here and there, but I was not a top third baseman in the league by any means. They just kind of put me there because, they knew I could play it, so they were like, why not? So they put me over at third, and I remember we got to 2 outs. Our pitcher was doing really good. Our pitcher was actually the former third baseman, which is why I was over at third, because he went over to pitch. But we had 2 outs. We were up by 2. All we had to do was get one more out, and What do you know? Batter hits a ground ball right to me. It was such like a slow motion play. You're in such a huge stage. You have these stands around you. You have all of this history put into one field. Across the street from us is the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Like it's literally across the street. And I'm just kind of like I couldn't even tell you. Like it felt like it took an hour for this ball to get to me just because everything went so slow. And I just had so many thoughts running through my head of just like, man, you don't want to screw this up. Like, you could screw this whole game up for your team. You're on Doubleday Field. This is kind of a big deal. Like, oh my gosh, this is going, this is doing this. And then all of a sudden, I just kind of had this voice just go over my head, just go, hold on. You know what you're doing. You've done this 1,000 times. This is nothing different. Just take your time and make this play. And so I fielded it, and I remember I triple pumped, and this actually made the pitcher scared. But I threw it as hard as I could, right across the diamond, nailed the first baseman right in the chest, made the play, ended the game. We won on Doubleday Field. And by the way, this was a tournament that our team was notoriously bad at. Like in the last 3 years when we played at this tournament, we would not win a single game at this tournament. Like we would win in games. We wouldn't win tournaments really anywhere else. In fact, the only rings that I have upstairs in my room is second place rings. Like we would not win tournaments, but we would win games in the tournament. Like we would get to the championship. We just wouldn't win the tournament. So this tournament specifically though, we wouldn't even win a game. Like we would go like 0-6 in this tournament, and it was terrible. But this was the first win in this tournament for our team ever. And I made the last out, and I just kind of like, there was just nothing like there was just something that went over me that was just like, yeah, of course. Like, of course we did. Like, this is when it happens. Like that, it was such a cool feeling, just a calmness, just a relaxation of just like, yeah, we did that. And I mean, I was on cloud nine for like the rest of the night because I was like, I made the last out at Doubleday Field. I mean, what are you gonna say about it? Like, yeah, I played in the same position that Babe Ruth played 100 years ago and Ken Griffey Jr. played like 2 years ago. Like, yeah, I did that. Like, that was me. And, it was such a cool day. It was such a cool week to spend with all of my teammates. It really brought us even more together as teammates, which I didn't think we needed at this point. We were very close as teammates, but, it was just a really cool part for us as a team. But yeah, so we get through that tournament, and it was a really cool moment for us. We had a lot of fun. We won actually another game in that tournament. We didn't end up winning the tournament, but we won in that game, and in another game. So we really beat the streak for our team, which was cool. And then we played throughout the rest of the summer, had a great time. But obviously Cooperstown just always had that place for you. And then came my junior season. So going into my junior year, I was kind of somewhat sort of hoping that I'd be a starter. There were some people that were expected to be ahead of me as far as the starting lineup goes, but it obviously wasn't a given. I just was like, oh, we're going to see what happens. We're going to go for it. And sure enough, the season came around and I was not the starting right fielder, and that hurt a little bit, just because the competitiveness in me wanted to play. But at the same time, I was like, you know what? Sometimes it happens, But before opening day, the right fielder actually got hurt and was going to be out for a couple of weeks. So I got the starting spot on opening day. It was kind of a cool thing. So on opening day, we played against this Beaver River team, the same team that I pinch ran for my first time on varsity last year. But this time I was given the 9th batting spot, and I was playing right field, so it was a really cool moment. The pitcher that we were facing was a very good pitcher, and, when I came up to the plate, I was pretty nervous. I was terrified, but the pitcher really didn't see me as much of a threat, and rightfully so. You face against a really good team like this, you all of a sudden see me go up there. I was a small, skinny twig. There wasn't really much to be afraid of. So, I'll never forget, first pitch that he threw was a changeup right down the middle. Didn't really care where it was. I swung with absolutely everything and just crushed it into center field. One hopped off the wall. I had a double. I was like, this is it. I'm here, man. Like, I'm here. I am in varsity now. And then in my second at bat, I faced off against this guy, and he threw me 2 fastballs that blew right past me, and then a slider that made me look like an idiot. And I struck out on 3 pitches and walked back to the dugout and was like, all right, I guess we're still waiting for me to show up at this point. Like, it was just a good and humbling moment for me. But, that was kind of how that season went. I really was just kind of learning how things were going. And it wasn't going very well. I hit about 240, which is not great. If you're a baseball fan, you would know the batting 240 is kind of like, yeah, I mean, you're probably batting ninth. Yeah, that makes about sense. There was a couple of times here and there where I'd get taken off because somebody had ended up taking my spot, and then he broke his fingers, so then I was put back on, and it just kind of was like, yeah, I mean, you have your spot, but do you really? And, coming off of my junior year, I was kind of like, I felt like I earned that. I felt like I deserved that. But, I learned very quickly that, that's not how it works. And going into my senior year, my position was in jeopardy again, and it really seemed like it was the only one. Looking into my senior year, there was a lot of positions filled by seniors. My senior class was littered with baseball players. We had probably one of the best first basemen in the league. We probably had the best second baseman, shortstop in the league. We probably had the best third baseman in the league. Left and center fielder, we probably had the best. But right field was kind of a question for our team. And that was something that, honestly, I kind of took personally. I was like, why is my position the question? Like, why am I the question? And, I guess the only other position that was really up in the air was our catching position. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Actually, I'll talk a lot about more of that later. But it was the only other spot that was really up in the air. And that was because our star catcher was graduating. So, it really wasn't like, no, we didn't know who was going to be able to fill that spot. But there was somebody else who was also a senior who was going after right field. And I was like, there's a real good chance that he could just take this from me if I don't work for it. So, like I said, I took it personally, and I worked my butt off all winter long. I was hitting whenever I could. I was working on fielding from the outfield. And that was even in the winter. We had this barn that would keep you away from the snow, and I would spend my time working in there. I was really trying to perfect everything that I was doing, and I was like, this year hitting's not going to be my weakness. I'm not going to be weak in hitting anymore. And we came into the start of the season, and I looked on the lineup, and I was batting 7th, and I was like, all right, that's pretty good. And batting 9th at the time was my younger brother. Now, I mentioned before, my younger brother, he is 3 years younger than me, and I don't say this to him too often, but he might be one of the best players that I could say that I've seen in a while. He is a very good baseball player. Again, I don't say this often. I usually try and hold him to a higher standard than I probably should, but that's just because I know how he feels, and I know what he does, and I know what he can do, and I know the best way for him to keep working is if he thinks there's still somebody ahead of him. It's kind of the reason that he likes baseball in the first place was because I would beat him in the backyard in baseball. I would just beat the crap out of him, and he didn't like it. And it would get to the point where it'd get to him, and then he would work, and he would work at it until all of a sudden he was good. And then he was really good. And now he's really, really good. And he recently was just posted on Syracuse.com. He led the section in batting average and broke our school record for batting average, which is ridiculous. He's only a junior in high school, so he still has another season. Good luck to everybody else in the section. Yeah, he's not done yet, and I'm very proud of him. I'm excited to see what he has in store left in him. But yeah, usually I don't say it too much because I don't want him to, get all cocky on me. But so he was batting 9th my senior year. So, it was nice, and at the time, I was okay with it, but I struggled to start out the season. I didn't hit exactly how I wanted. I was still hitting okay, but I didn't hit exactly how I wanted. And sooner or later, I found myself hitting 9th, and my brother was hitting 8th. Yes, my brother hit ahead of me in my senior year of baseball, and he was a freshman. If you ever want to know what embarrassment and loss feels like, that's about it. But I wasn't done. I kind of, again, I apologize to my brother if he hears this, but I took it personally. I didn't like that my brother was hitting ahead of me in high school. I didn't. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove everyone wrong. I'm just going to do it. And just kind of that, go for it mentality just really worked for me. I ended the season batting 450. I had the highest batting average on the team, and I just lost it, like I was like, man, like this is it. This was the year that I first tagged the phrase, the J-Man special. It is a kind of base hit that I would get probably at least once a game, where I would just hit a line drive to right field. It would go right over the second baseman's head and land in right field. And I did it again, maybe like once a game, usually like twice or three times in a game. Like I did it so often, I called it the J-Man special because no one did it as much as I did. So I had an absolute amazing time with this team. Our team was probably the best team that our school has ever seen. We were completely undefeated in the regular season. We went 18-0 in the regular season, and we won our first game in sectionals. A little bit about this season. The first game I'll mention was our first record-breaking game, and that was against a school called TI. I'll call them, where one of our pitchers threw a perfect game. It was such a perfect game that the other team only put the ball in play twice in the whole game, and it was the same player, and it was the best hitter on their team. Once he hit a fly ball to right field where I was, and then the second time I was already subbed out, and he hit another fly ball to right field, and our other right fielder made the catch. And it was a really cool catch, and it was later, so it was a really cool moment. I think we actually gave him one of the game balls just because he made that catch. It was such a spectacular catch. It was a perfect game. It was just a really cool thing to be a part of because as a team, like for every single game, like the first 3 innings, you don't really pay attention to stuff like that. It's usually by like the 4th or 5th inning. But we only played 5 innings because we won by more than 10, which is a rule in our league. And if you're up by 10 by the 5th inning, that the game ends and you mercy rule them. I later found out that this rule was made in the Frontier League because of our school. We started beating teams by so much that our league added this rule. Other sections have had it for a lot longer, but our league added it because of South Jeff from long time ago. But we put up runs, and one thing that was so cool about this team was we just had this mentality when we walked into every single game of just like, yeah, I mean, we're going to show up, we're going to beat you, and then we're going to go home, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Like, that was just how we walked into every single game. And it was such a cool environment to be in where we just kind of knew how we were going to handle business and how we were going to beat you. And it was so cool. I miss that type of feeling. It's one feeling that I long for, in the future. But it was really cool. And then another game that I'll talk about, that was another record-breaking game, was against a team that our school really does not like very much. And they're one of our school rivals. They just complain a lot, and we didn't like them. In the previous year, in my junior year, we broke our school record for most runs scored in a game against a team. We scored 24 in a game, and it was against this team. And then in this game, specifically in my senior year, we broke that very record. And again, we were only able to play in 5 innings because we we beat them by more than 10. We beat them 26-0. It was the 3rd consecutive year that we played against this team and didn't even give up a single run against this team. Like, that was just how much dominance we showed in a lot of these games. Was we wouldn't even let you score, and then we would just keep scoring on you. And again, we scored 26 runs in this game. It is currently the school record. I don't know if anyone will break it anytime soon, but sometimes I kind of hope that happens because I still cheer for the teams that are over there in my high school now. But it's a record that as a team we are very proud of because it was a full team dominant win, and it was really cool to be a part of. And I'm glad that I wasn't on the other end of that, which we'll get to in a little bit later. But another big part of this senior season was I pitched a little bit. If you remember back on episode 1, I mentioned that my U12 coach basically told me that, yeah, kid, you're going to pitch when we're getting blown out or when we're blowing another team out, but that's probably it. You'll probably never pitch in a higher level. Well, sure enough, in my varsity season, I was told by my varsity coach, you're going to pitch when we are blowing another team out, and you will probably never pitch in a higher level than this. So enjoy this, but you'll only pitch in blowouts. And there was one specific game that I pitched in, and we were up by, I believe we were up by 10. We were going into the final inning, and I went out to pitch, and I got the first 2 outs pretty easily. And then this young man stepped in, and I don't even remember what I threw to him or what happened, but he just kind of threw his bat out at it and hit an absolute laser right back at me. Never hit the ground, never hit grass, never hit anything except his bat, and then right on the middle of my shin. And I remember the sound that it made sounded like a wooden bat after it hit his metal bat. I immediately fell to the ground. It took my legs right out from underneath me. But I remember I didn't feel any pain in the very moment, and I just kind of knew that it was coming. So I looked up, and the ball, it hit off of me, and it rolled like 2 feet in front of me. So I was like, I just have to, get this out now. So I crawled forward and grabbed the ball, and I just threw it to first. Our first baseman was so shocked at what happened, he started walking towards me as soon as it hit me. And then once I started crawling for the ball, it clicked in his head that we still had to finish the play. So thankfully, he jumped back and was on first and caught the ball. The batter barely even moved because he was so shocked at what just happened. So when I crawled for the ball, he started to run, but it was a little too late. So I was able to actually get the out, which was pretty impressive, and it ended the game. My coaches, I talked to them afterwards. They basically said that they saw it hit me. They were like, oh, that must have hurt. And then they saw me move, and they're like, oh, it must have not hurt. And then saw me make the play and just kind of were like, yeah, let's go. This is over. But as soon as I made the play, man, did it hurt. All the adrenaline just kind of went away, and it was a horrible pain. That was on my shin. It hit me square in the shin bone, and I couldn't even really walk. My team carried me, and I'm not saying like, oh, they put my arms around their shoulder and walked me. No, the entire team picked me up and carried me off the field and set me down on the bench. And then the guy who was playing first base, I had been teams with him since Little League. He actually picked me up and carried me to the car and set me in the car. So hats off to him. He's a real good teammate for that. But it was, it was hurting so bad. I was just putting ice on it. But I don't know, there was something in me that was just kind of like, it doesn't I feel like I could stand on it if I wanted to. I could put pressure on this if I wanted to. And my mom immediately, who was scared out of her mind because if you were there, you would probably have thought the same thing as my mom, that my shin just broke. There was so many signs that my shin had broken. Number one, the sound was brutal. And then number two, there was so much that says, you broke your shin. It was, so my mom immediately drives me to the hospital, and almost on the whole car ride, I'm just like, I don't think it's broken. And she's like, it's broken. I'm like, I just don't think it's broken. She's like, it's broken. So we get to the hospital, we get an x-ray, and they come back and they go, just a really bad bruise. And if you want to know how bad this bruise was, my shin literally had a dent in it. It literally looked like you could put a baseball there and it would just sit there like a mantle. It was bad, but it didn't break. So, praise God for that. Drink your milk, kids, and eat your veggies, because probably saved my shin. I think that was also what helped. But no, it was all God, honestly. There's no way that I shouldn't have broken my shin, but God had other plans, and, we'll get to those plans in another episode, and we'll also get to some of those plans later on. But I was out for a week before I was back playing, and the first game that I played was against the exact same team, and yeah, it was kind of a cool moment for me. I felt, you feel like that revenge tour type thing. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was not a very exciting experience, I'll say that, but you live and you learn, and that was just how that one game went. But overall, like, the season was very good for our team. We were 18-0. We went into the first round of playoffs. We won, so we went 19-0. And then in the second game of sectionals, our team just wasn't hitting very well. We were just struggling. It was the first game of the season we were struggling. And, the other team, they got a couple of runs. We got a couple of runs. And then all of a sudden, the out gets made. And all of a sudden, you just kind of go, wait, what was the score again? And we just kind of found out that we had just lost 4-2. And it was very weird. It was one of the weirdest losses I've ever taken, because it was a loss that the entire time we just didn't think of it as we were losing, and then all of a sudden we lost. Like, going into this, it wasn't a comprehension of us that we would lose this game. Like, we didn't even think that was an option. And then all of a sudden the final out gets made, and you're just kind of sitting there like, wow, that's the end. And, it was a very long night, a very tough pill to swallow as a team, as a player. A lot of us teammates, we were kind of thinking like this was going to be the end of our baseball career. That was kind of how I thought. I thought my baseball career was going to end in high school. I didn't really have any idea of playing in college. And then all of a sudden our season ended, and I was just kind of like, it can't end like that. Like, it can't end like that. And it was just about that time that I decided that I was going to go and I was going to play in college. And I was going to play for JUCO. They have a baseball team, and their baseball team had struggled the past few years. And I went, you know what? I'm going to join that team, and I'm going to keep playing for a couple more years. So it was not the easiest decision, but at the same time, it was pretty easy just because I got to play more. So, yeah, I mean, it was a long summer, kind of going through like, wow, like, this team is done. Like, I'm not going to be teammates with those guys anymore. And I went to campus for my freshman year in college, and sure enough, the same teammate that I've had since Little League, Caleb, he was on my college team. And, it was a really cool thing for us. We got to share the team. We get to share our final couple of seasons together again. We ended Little League together, we ended high school together, and now we were going to go through college together, and it was really cool to have him on my team. He was also probably the best, first baseman in the league, so, I knew that it wasn't like we were getting some crappy player, we were getting a really good one at that. But we get into my first college season, and this was different than anything I'd ever done. The commitment level was so much more. Our head coach, is a good friend of mine. He was a real good friend of my JV coach. He also does a lot of stuff with FCA. But my freshman year of college ball was very different. We had an assistant coach who held a morning workout at 7 a.m. every single day, and you had to show up earlier than that. If you showed up later, then the whole team was getting badly punished. And after our first day of lift, we left some weights out. And the next day we had a punishment where we were pushing a sled, I believe it was 80 yards each. And the rest of the team had to do burpees the whole time. And we had 16 guys on the team, so you can imagine how that went. And then, we had another punishment where we were pushing rags across a basketball court, and that's a down and back. And if you don't know what that does to your body, it is bad things. Your head goes underneath, so a lot of blood rushes to your head, and then you stand up, so then it immediately rushes back, so you get a little dizzy. Your stomach gets off. So we had, I think, of the 16 guys involved, we had like 14 guys that had thrown up by the end of it. But the issue was when we did this punishment, we did it at 5 a.m. So they couldn't throw up because they hadn't eaten anything. So they were just dry heaving over a trash can. And then coach would give us a water break, and the guys would drink water and then immediately throw up their water because their body had been trying to throw up this whole time, but it wasn't able to because it wasn't It didn't have anything. And then immediately after this, we went and we did our lift after this punishment. So that was the dynamic of this team. It was just, it was a very cutthroat team. And in some cases we needed that. In some cases I think it was a little much, but I think in some cases it was needed. Some of these players, they were just slacking off. I mean, when you're first in college, especially for some of these guys, you're introduced to finally being alone. You want to party, you want to have fun, you want to do things that you probably shouldn't do. And they did things that they probably shouldn't do. So, there was just a lot of things that, that could get in the way of, our team continuing to be, better. And, our coach just wouldn't let us. We'd get punished a ton. And then going into the season, we sucked. We started off the season very good. We won our first 4 games in a row. We were feeling good. And then we had a 40 games, not a 40 game season. We had like a 32 game season, and we only won 3 of them after the first 4. So we won our first 4, and then at the end of the season, our record read 7-25. Yeah, it was bad. We were terrible. A lot of it was defense was not very good. Our pitching walked a lot of guys. Our hitting wasn't all that. It just really was not good. It was a long season. We got our butts kicked a ton. It was bad. And it came to the point where I almost thought maybe this is where I just call it. I was a starter, but it was mostly out of injuries, kind of the same as my junior year. I was like, I'm just not, this isn't the same team as my high school. I should have just ended it there. I shouldn't have done this. So, it came to my sophomore year, and I was like, I don't think I'm going to do this that much. And, all of a sudden, I get pulled into my coach's office. And he goes, are you planning to play next year? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm thinking about maybe heading to, I'm taking a few extra classes in the fall, graduate early, head to the 4-year that I want to go to and start my major in the path that I want to. And he basically said, well, I'm not sure if this helps, but I hope you know that we're expecting you to kind of be more of a leader on this team this year. We have a lot of guys leaving and some guys returning, but we're going to need someone to kind of step up. So we're kind of hoping you to do that. I was like, I can, but, we'll see if, how it goes. I, worked my butt off all winter. I was like, I have to be better. Whether I'm going to be a leader on this team or not, I don't know. But I want to work my way to at least be in that position. So cut to my sophomore year of college. This was 2024 to 2025. This was this past year. And I kind of knew going in, this was it. This is the end of my career. I'm only doing this. Like, I was taking classes in college that I didn't need only because of baseball. I wanted to play baseball. So we start off the season. We got a new team. Coaching staff is different. We had a little bit of a more relaxing season. We didn't have nearly the amount of punishments, but we just kind of were going after it. We started off the season a lot better. We were playing a lot better. The team was just better overall. The hitting was ridiculous. Our team was probably one of the best hitting teams in our region. The fielding wise, it was a little here and there, but for the most part, it was good. Our pitching was where we struggled at the start of the year, but they had moments where they just shined. Credit to every single player on that team. If you guys are listening, a ton of credit to you, a ton of respect to you guys. You guys are very good baseball players, and I hope the best for you next year. But a tough part for me was at the start of the year, I didn't get much time on the field at all. I felt like I had worked to earn it, and I just wasn't getting it. And, I kind of had a moment where I was like, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I should have left. But, I talked to my parents, and they said, why don't you just talk to coach, see what he's thinking? So I talked to my coach. I know him as a person, so I was like, I just want to talk to you man to man. Like, what do you thought? What are your thoughts? And, he gave me a very straight answer. and that there was basically a lot of what he said was, as of right now, we're still figuring some things out, but, there's still more work for you to do. And I knew that he was right. My hitting was not that great. It kind of fell back after, like, into last year and the year before. Like, my freshman year of college, I did not hit very well. I think I hit 208, which is worse than my junior year of high school. So I just, again, I was like, I have to figure this out, like, wherever it is. So I really just wasn't getting a ton of playing time. I was just kind of trying to figure some stuff out. And all of a sudden, we get into a game and we're getting blown out. And sure enough, my coach goes, Josh, why don't you go out and pitch? And it made me laugh because over and over again, I had been told, you're probably not going to pitch next year. This is probably it. Like, even my freshman year, I pitched and, he's just like, you're just going to pitch and blow out games. That's it. And I was like, okay. And then over the off season, I talked to him and he said, you will not pitch for us next year. You will not pitch. I promise you, you will not pitch. So when I got told that I was pitching in a game, it really made me laugh just for how many times I've been told that I wasn't going to pitch. And then just weeks later, I'm out on the mound pitching. So I went out and we were getting there, but we were down like 22-0. It was bad. I went out onto the mound and my catcher looks at me and goes, what are you throwing? I'm like, just call a fastball. Let's get out of this inning. And first batter I faced, they're all fastballs. He flew out. We ended the inning. We ended up losing the game right there. But, I just kind of was like, there, we're done there. I talked to the pitching coach and he basically said, like, do you have other pitches that you can throw? And I said, yeah. I just, I wanted to get out of it there. He said, that's fine. A couple days later, we got into another game. We were losing pretty bad. It wasn't as bad, but I went out and pitched again, started throwing a few extra pitches, did okay. Then we played against this one team that was ranked nationwide. They were the sixth ranked team in the country at the time. And our goal for our team was to take one game. So our plan was we were going to kind of throw the first game and then try and win the second game. So we put one pitcher on the mound who was probably one of our worst pitchers, and then out of the pen would be me. And then after that, I'd just kind of shove, and then we'd lose the game and then go into game two. So in the first inning, this guy got rocked. He gave up 9 runs, didn't even get much of an out. And so I was like, all right, I guess we're going out. I went out in the first inning, gave up a run, and then from that point, I only gave up 3 more runs over the next 4 innings that I pitched. Felt really good. The team started making a little bit of a push, and then, they started scoring more on me. I got pulled. They put in somebody else, and they ended up beating us by 10, but, we were kind of expecting that. Our coach was kind of like, all right, we're going to kind of take you a little bit more serious here in pitching-wise. I was like, all right, I'll take that. So the next practice that we had, I just kind of was like, I want something more. If I'm going to pitch, I need to be a pitch. I want to have more. So at the time, really all that I had was a fastball, a curveball, and a sinker. And my sinker was all right, but really all that I relied on was my fastball and curveball. And so I went up to my coach and I said, listen, I want to try and throw there's a few pitches that I'm looking at. And so I spent the previous night looking on YouTube, finding different pitch grips. And there were some that I knew, some that I had worked on before, but none that I had really thrown in a game before. And I just went up to him. I was like, listen, these are some pitches that I'm thinking about. What are your thoughts? And he said, well, how do you throw them? And I was like, well, mind if I... So I went out and I threw a bullpen. And the 2 pitches... There were 3 pitches that I was trying. I was trying a slider, a splitter, and what's called a forkball. If you're a baseball fan and you don't know what I mean by forkball, well, you're not alone. A forkball is one of the most rare pitches to see in baseball. It's exactly like the splitter, but it's slower. Not a lot of pitchers throw it. So the idea was, I threw my slider. He goes, okay, I like that. We'll probably keep that. For those of you who don't know, sliders, they just go straight across. They go side to side. Then I threw a splitter, which is... It's faster, kind of like your fastball, and then towards the end, it just drops off really quick. So it kind of gets underneath your barrel. Forces, like, really weak contact. And he goes, okay, that wasn't great, but it's all right. And then I threw this forkball. Now, I told my coach that I had thrown them all before, but I never really, thrown them in a game. It was a lie. I had never thrown this forkball before. I just kind of wanted to try it because it had a really weird pitch grip, and I wanted to try it. So I threw it first time, and he went, "What was that?" And I said, "It was a forkball. I just threw the forkball." He goes, "Throw that again." So I threw it again. And what I found out was I was able to throw it, and I would have such low spin rate that at times it could actually knuckle. If you don't know what knuckle means, it's when the ball doesn't spin at all and it just lets the air kind of carry it and it moves throughout the air and it just kind of dances around. It's the most unpredictable thing that a pitcher can do. So I very quickly that got added to my arsenal. So I had the slider and the forkball to it. And in my next outing, I went out and the first pitch batter that I faced, we had 2 outs. I threw the forkball and he just popped it right up and he turned around and looked and he went, "What the heck was that?" And I just looked at him and I just shrugged my shoulders and just went, "I don't know, dude. It's just something that I'm trying." But it became a big staple part of my pitching. I shortly afterwards, I went out against another team that we were pretty much expecting to lose to, and we did lose, but I threw a lot better than I probably should have. And my coach brought me over to the side and just said, "Just so you know, we're officially adding you to the bullpen. You're a pitcher now." Which is funny because I had pitched all the way up through, but at no point did anyone say that I was a pitcher because they just kind of expected me to kind of get tossed to the side. Around this time as well, I started to get more chances out on the field. Our team ran through a lot of injuries, and so I started to get more and more chances in right and hitting wise. All of a sudden, the J-Man special kind of came back. My team started to catch on. They started calling it the Madison special, where it's the same thing, just a base hit into right field. And I really started to find my swing. I started to figure it out. It felt like me again. And, we started getting towards the end of the season, and we found out that we were not going to make playoffs, and it was kind of tough on the team, but, we knew that we had, we put in a lot of work. We'd won 2 times more games in this season than we did in my freshman year, so that was always good. And we get to our final series. It's sophomore night. We played against these guys called Corning. Now, in the previous year, I forgot to mention this earlier, but in the previous year, when we played against Corning, it was one of the 3 games that we had won. We beat them 10-0, and in the game, I hit a line drive to right field, and the right fielder dove and missed it, and I ran all the way around the bases for a home run. My first ever real home run. If you look in stat sheets, anywhere it says it's a home run. There's no errors in there. It's all a home run. It was my first ever real home run. It didn't get over the fence, but it was a real home run. I did it in college, so it was really special for me, and my whole family was able to make it to the game, so that was also really cool. But now we were playing them in our final series of the year. We had sophomore night, and I was an announcer for the school for the previous 2 years, and so they had you would know if you'd see my commentating account. But anyways, I was able to talk my way into announcing our sophomore night. So I literally got up in the booth and I announced the starting lineups, which includes myself in it. And then as soon as I was done, I stood up there, waited for the national anthem, and then ran all the way down and ran right out into right field for my to play in this game. And actually, so I was out in right field, and the game just started to get going. And one thing that I will mention is when you're out on the field, especially when you play, our team had 40 games this season. I had mentioned that we went through a ton of injuries. Your body goes through a lot. In fact, I didn't even bring this up, but a week prior to our sophomore night, I was pitching in a game that really did not matter for us, and one of the players hit a hard ground ball right back at me, and it hit me right in the same leg that hit me in my senior year of high school. But I was able to walk off the field there. I felt okay, and the next day I was back out on the field. I wasn't supposed to play in that game because I had just been hit, but our right fielder was struggling, and so our coach just looked at me and said, "Can you do it?" And I said, "Let's do it." So I played literally 24 hours later. I was back in right field, playing in this and right. And then in the next game, I ended up pitching in that game. So 24 hours after being hit by a baseball on the mound, I was pitching, and it was a pretty spectacular moment for me and the team. The team was really right behind me. It was such a cool moment for the team just to kind of be behind me in that whole time. But back to sophomore night, so that's just to kind of show you, like, my body's not feeling at 100%, but there's no excuses, So I was out in right field, didn't really get a ton hit to me. We went through game one. Our team hit all right. We just didn't play great. We still won the game, but I think I got a hit here and there. Then came game two. I spent game two trying to hit a home run. I did not hit very well. I ended up walking twice. I scored from first a couple times, which felt pretty cool. I had some stolen bases here and there, which was nice. And then I also played in center in this second game. And this is where we're going to kind of bring this in towards the end, because this is how my career ended. We went into the fifth inning. Our team was up by, I believe, 12 at the time. We were winning by a lot. We knew we were going to end up winning this game in 5. And I was out in center, ready to just end this game. And the first batter hit this fly ball right at me. And, it was kind of one of those moments where, I just had this feeling like this is it. This is the last fly ball that you'll ever have to field. And I stood right underneath it, waved it off, yelled, "I got it!" Boom. Made the catch. Nice and easy. Had a good smile, waved to everyone. I was like, yep, that's it. And the next batter came up and hit this line drive to my left. And I went running after it, and I was like, holy crap, I can catch this. And I ran, and I slid, and I caught it. And I was like, all right, that's cool. I got 2. And my teammates were all like, yeah, attaboy, let's go. And I was feeling good. And then I was like, wow, that was awesome. And then the very next pitch, batter hits a fly ball to my right. I ran over and caught it. Within a span of 2 minutes, I made all of the final 3 outs. My team went nuts. They loved it. I got a bunch of good high fives and hugs from my teammates. We celebrated in the outfield to end the game. And then at the end, my coach gave me the game ball just for that. And it was such a cool feeling. It was such a cool moment. I loved every single second of, that season. I loved being a part of. I'm happy I didn't leave early. I'm happy I didn't leave before the season started. I'm happy I stuck it out and wrote it with these guys, because they really made it worth it. They're really good guys, and I wish the absolute best for every single one of them. But that brings us to where I am now. So, as you know, I've been doing this. I've kind of told you this whole thing. That ended my baseball career, as far as I know. I'm unsure as to where it's going to go. I've committed to SUNY Oswego State for the next 2 years. I'll be focusing more on my major, which is broadcasting, so that I can hopefully, do this for a living, hopefully on a bigger stage. But yeah, I'm not really sure if I'll be able to play baseball again, which is why I wanted to do this. I wanted to share my story. I wanted to share with people why, what kind of goes on for certain players, and, sometimes how they feel about certain things, especially someone like myself who was always smaller, always kind of seen as the outcast of a team, especially with the caliber of the teams that I had played on. And also that, baseball is a game that's wild. You don't really know what you're going to get until, you're there. And, it's an unpredictable sport. Sometimes you're having a good day, sometimes you're not. And sometimes those good days go on into weeks, and sometimes good weeks move on into months. And, it's... I've learned a lot of really good life lessons from this game, and, I hope you guys can learn something from what I've been saying. It's a great game. I love it. I'll never stop watching it. I'll never stop loving it. But, yeah, as of now, really all that I'm doing is just kind of enjoying my summer. I've spent some time over at the baseball field just swinging. Again, unsure if I'll ever step on a field again, but I just love this game so much that I just can't stay away from it. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. This is a lot longer than the previous episode, but, it really needed to be, because this was more of an in-depth talking than more of a time-consuming one. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. Go check out the sponsor Underdogs. Use code JMAN777 to get 15% off. And I think next I'll be doing more of a life podcast. If you guys have any ideas of anything else that I should do, please let me know. And yeah, again, thank you guys so much for listening. God bless, and let's go.